the bell has rung. So get seated and join Elementary Schooled for today's interview.
Hey,
Hello.
I'm so glad you accepted this.
Well, how can I say no to a good friend?
This is my good dear friend and phenomenal kindergarten teacher, Rachel Orison. And I thought it would be really valuable to have families and parents know what happens kind of the behind the scenes of kindergarten. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
I want to preface this a little bit and say that I came and hung out with you for a whole day in your kindergarten classroom. And I was so impressed. I mean, I know you do your job well, but it was really fun to see. It was almost like magic. And I really do mean that. Just the different transitions that I think are really tricky with kids these days in general, but your transitions are so smooth. And I think that's really hard for teachers because behaviorally, if you're going to move from one area of the room to another, that it does have potential for disaster. Am I right?
Most definitely. And that's something that I have worked very hard on. So
You
thank you.
are good at it. And you have a good balance of fun. Like, I'm going to use my funny voice here, but then we're going to focus on this part. And you're really good at setting expectations. Do you feel like you're in an evaluation right now?
No,
You
I'm
can
all
come
good.
hang out with me and evaluate me. I think I could use some constructive criticism. But I did steal a couple
A
things from
little
your class.
kindergarten in fourth grade.
What's that?
A little kindergarten in fourth grade.
Oh, I did steal a couple things from your class. Like I've been singing, put your name on your paper and the date. We've been doing a lot of that because we have a few repeat offenders. So I said, let me tell you what my friend Mrs. Orison does in her class. And then that was kind of fun. So we sing that sometimes. But there's a lot that can be taken from a kindergarten class, just some good life skill, basics.
That's where I love it.
Will you introduce yourself and give us a little background?
Sure. I'm Rachel Orison. I'm teaching kindergarten here in Utah. And this is my second year in kindergarten. I did a year before in first grade. And then 20 some years ago, did first grade before I took a break and had some children. And for some crazy reason, decided I'd come back and I love it. So
I can tell that you love it. So you have an enthusiasm in your classroom that is really contagious. And I think kids really feed off of that. They know that you genuinely like them and that you want to be there.
thank you.
So your experience is kind of like mine, where you taught school and then you stayed home with your kids, your 4 kids, and then you returned. What is one of the biggest differences that you noticed when you came back?
I would hands down the biggest difference coming back. I came back during the COVID year, coming off of the COVID, so fall 2020 is when I returned to the classroom. And the biggest change since I left 20 years ago was technology. When I left 20 years ago, I was using my computer really for a little bit of email correspondence, but that was about it.
Yeah.
And to enter a classroom where, a lot of things were being done on iPads, and I was supposed to train students and be able to supply curriculum online for students, not just teach them how to read, but teach them how to use technology, how to read. And
Right.
that was just like kind of overwhelming that first year.
How did you do it?
I had 2 awesome partner teachers that kind of had done the spring of COVID and figured some things out. And so we kind of adapted it there. We were every other day for the first semester. And it was a godsend when we all came back to the classroom, because if there's one thing I learned is that connection and being in person is so important, especially in those beginning stages of reading in school.
Absolutely. It was challenging. And especially, I was in second grade when COVID started. And I think, especially for young children who really rely on seeing your face and your mouth and how you enunciate, it really taught me how much they rely on that for those skills.
Definitely. I really, I finished reading a book a little over the summer called Kids These Days. And it was talking about that kids these days, they're not attention seeking, but they are connection seeking individuals. And that was by Jodi Carrington. But I just think, our behavior problems, when they came back to the classroom, it wasn't that they were like bad kids or naughty kids. It was that they needed attention, that they had been away from their peers and they wanted to connect. And they needed that connection in order to learn. None of us learn if we don't feel valued or good about ourselves. And so in order to be in that proper headspace, we need to feel valued and important and connected.
It's a huge piece of teaching too. That saying of children don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That's true with teenagers, people in general. But I think that's one of the basics of teaching, just like you said. So you're connecting with your students. And when we did Zoom, the connection piece, we tried, but it just wasn't the same as being in person.
No, you can't see who's tuning into you. I had a friend that was, I don't know when it was posted, but she put like a thing that said connection, and then she had a line, and then it was over the word perfection, connection over perfection. And I've kind of adapted it to teaching, connection over direction. And you know what? I can't direct or teach a child anything until I've connected with them. And it's really hard to connect when we're not in person.
I want to tell you my two favorite quotes from that day.
I'm ready to hear this.
Well, one was when you said, "We're not going to eat our shoes." And then one was a little girl that said, Mrs. Orison, I hear Velcro."
Oh, yes.
Can you tell us about the Velcro?
Velcro. So here's the thing. If you get 20 some odd kids sitting at a floor, and that's another thing that has really drastically changed in 20 years. 20 years ago, not every kid had Velcro shoes like they do today.
Right.
But you get 20 kids sitting in a rug and one starts playing with Velcro, and next thing you have a symphony of Velcro taking place at the rug. So we adapted a little line from a popular movie saying, "We don't talk about Bruno and we don't like to hear Velcro." Unfortunately, I think I probably made them like really worried about it, because at parent teacher conferences, I heard that one little girl was so deathly scared to wear Velcro to school because I had told them that I didn't like the sound of it. And the sound doesn't bother me. It's just when we're trying to do a lesson,
and you have several going off.
Several adjustments going on. So
that's funny. And you make a good point that you do rug time. So kids are sitting at the rug for part of the day, and they just probably notice what's going on with their shoes, or it's something to play with, right?
It's something to play with. They don't have the pencil at their desk, or it's just something to pull and kind of ease a little anxiety. So,
and you have another, the Velcro is not a rule, but your invitation, talk about the birthday party invitation.
Oh, and we don't talk about birthdays either. Yeah. So we don't talk about Bruno. We don't like the sound of Velcro, and we don't talk about birthday parties at school. And so I try to make a big point that, it would be really disappointed if I wasn't invited. Just joke, like,
yeah,
to let them know that, hey, if everybody's invited to a party and you're the one that isn't, that could really hurt your feelings. And there's just no way that every kid in the class can be invited to every single party. So if you are having a party, let's just keep
it under wraps, literally.
Yep, after school.
Reminds me of your bulletin board right behind you there. putting the kind in kindergarten. And
I know.
you,
I wish I knew the name of the cute girl I got it from. I got it off of a really like popular teacher site, Teachers Pay Teachers. And
I love it.
but it's great. It really, everything that we do in kindergarten comes back to putting the kind in kindergarten. You know, every book we read can come back to, you know, is it kind to take care of the earth? How can we be kind to our families? How can we be kind to animals? How can we kindly move through the halls? You know, so that's kind of a big emphasis is, you know what, how do we every day put kindness into others' lives and our own?
I think that's so great. And you, when in talking about the connection piece, that's connection, using that kindness. Kindergarten's come a long way since you and I were in kindergarten. And I do want you to talk about curriculum and those pieces of beginning learning to read and how important those pieces are.
So the curriculum that I mainly address in kindergarten is phonemic awareness, the ability to hear sounds in words and break them apart and play with them. Phonics, the relationship between sounds and letters, and just like those beginning writing skills and awareness of numbers, being able to subitize. That's another word, big word I've learned since I've come back. Just subitizing is just the ability to look at something and know what number that is. Like if I hold up this, you automatically know it's the number
5.
5.
Oh,
You
yeah,
didn't
it passed.
count. Yeah, you didn't have to count every single finger. She just looked at it and knew it. And so a lot of what I teach is, first of all, counting, writing, and identifying numbers through different objects with dice, dominoes, our fingers, tally marks, 10 frames. So that's kind of what I'm covering.
I noticed that when you speak of writing letters, that you have a little phrase that you do. Like when I was there that day, you were doing capital N and lowercase n, and you had something like top down, lift the pencil, slide, and fly. Did I do that right?
Yes,
Something like
tall
that.
down. So
Yeah.
we talk a lot about
Oh, tall. That's where this
tall, because
tall.
it starts, because so when
At the
we
top
do
line.
letters, we want to start them on those top lines. We talk about there's tall letters and there's small letters, and there's capital letters and lowercase, but lowercase letters can still be tall. And so, you know, just getting them to visually see letters and giving them those experience, just a lot of different seeing it, saying it, talking about it, being able to write it. First, we talk about sound before letter. That's another thing that I think has changed is,
Yes.
you know, when I was in college, they taught me first, like, oh, this is the letter A, it says ah. And now we talk about the sound because we are born wired to talk. We hear things, but learning a symbol structure in an alphabet is a lot. That's not innate. That doesn't come to us naturally. That's something we have to be taught. So we talk first about the sound, and then we introduce, there's a symbol that represents that sound. And so so first of all, that phonemic awareness element is so key in what we do in kindergarten. And I think that's the biggest problem with the way technology has overtaken our communities, is that we're talking less with one another.
Yeah.
Because, you know what, we don't have to argue over what show we're going to watch because we can each go to our own room. So there's one discussion that we haven't had. That's less talking time. The more I'm on my iPad, the less I'm talking with my child, you know, and
because struggling readers now, we're finding that it's more about the sound. They're not recognizing the sound and associating it with the letter. Is that right?
Or they can't even hear the sound. They're not being able to. I brought a few little like things. So I'll just kind of do a little sample with you. So for instance, if I'm teaching, okay, I want Melanie, what's the first sound in cat?
And then I say k, 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 k.
So k is the first sound in cat. K. I don't have to have a letter. I just want to be able to hear it.
Hear it.
So then we want to move on. Let's listen for that last sound in cat. Cat. What was that last sound? Oh, she heard
T.
at the end. So we're going to put this at. And then what's that middle sound? At.
And then you have the child identify.
And so without the child even having to look at a letter, they already now are associating that cat has 3 sounds. So we're going to need to have 3 different, and sometimes it has more than 1 letter, but we have to now have 3 symbols or more to represent those sounds. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is sometimes parents are so eager, like, oh, we've got to learn our ABCs. We've got to learn our ABCs. Well, ABCs don't mean anything if you can't hear the sounds that they represent.
That's so valuable. And I know when I taught 2nd grade, when you get into blends, so CL together or BL or BR, for them to really break it down and put them in those sound boxes like you were doing, it is essential that they know how to do that. And foundationally, I just want people to understand that foundationally, kindergarten is so important. And so the sound and identifying, and just like what you said with phonemic awareness, which I learned a lot about in this training, and I thought it was really critical that we break that down with a struggling reader. And when you went from that piece to writing the letter, so attaching it to the symbol, and you did that in such a beautiful way I saw in your classroom. When I used to do some tutoring, I would notice a student maybe older, if they've developed that habit of doing the letter incorrectly, it's really hard to undo that after several years.
It's even hard to undo it after 1 year. So even when I was teaching 1st grade, just even undoing what patterns they picked up in kindergarten. And I think that's why I'm loving kindergarten, is because I get to teach habits. I don't have to break habits. And so we are teaching them the important, and the one thing that I've learned in this letters training is the importance of, when you correctly teach them how to form letters and you're saying those things, it's putting a picture in their mind that will stay there. And so every time we repeat that, they just learn that letters start at the top, they go to the bottom, with the exception of very few letters that don't start at the top or the middle line. So
I saw your students really respond to that.
Yeah. And their
little
writing,
sayings.
their handwriting is beautiful.
It's good.
Crazy. We're 30 days into school and they really are picking it up. And I just think that kids rise to what you expect. If you think that they can't do it, they probably won't, but they know that I believe they can do it. And they now believe they can do it.
And they're doing it.
For
Will you
sure.
talk about the mirror?
The mirror. Yes, I brought my mirror.
I do, because
I
did the training for that, but to see it in action was really fun for me.
It's really fun. So this is the reason why I have the mirror. And I don't know if my camera's backward. It's backwards, right? For you?
No, I see it. I see it.
It correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. So one thing that's super awesome about teaching phonics through sound first and then applying a letter is that so many sounds are made in a similar way. So the letter P and the letter B are both made with our lips together. We're going to close our lips. We're going to kind of push out a little bit of air. So make the sound P. So when we make the sound P, P, and if I hold my hand on my neck, I don't feel anything vibrating because my voice box is turned off. But now if I make the sound B, 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 I can feel my voice box moving. And so what we do is we'll go back to our desks and the kids will grab their mirrors and they get to look in the mirror and see that, yeah, that's interesting. P, B. And so then when we go to writing, that's where I see them really using our sound wall the most, is they're trying to figure out what letter. I want to write pig and I don't know what letter says P. And I'll say, go to the sound wall, look at my mouth, P. So I'll say, okay, do you find the mouth? And they'll look up here and I'll say, okay, did that sound vibrate or was that sound unvoiced? Was it voiced or unvoiced? And they'll say, oh, I don't feel a vibration, so it must be the letter P. And they'll go back to their desks and write it. One thing that was really fun today with our mirrors is we learned the letter O. So now they know short A, short I, and short O. And so we made the sounds and I said, what's happening to your mouth as we make those sounds? And they're looking in their mirror and they're saying, I, ah. And I said, what is happening? Can anyone describe? And they're like, my mouth keeps getting bigger and bigger. Well, where that is so important, and I've even seen this in my own student that has struggled picking up phonics, is that sometimes those vowel sounds are so close, but when we can look in a mirror and really hear them. So now I'm not just giving you a sound, I'm giving you something with sight to look at, and I'm having you feel things turned on, turned off. And they're starting to realize that, oh, okay, that sound is an ah because my mouth is open as far as it can go. So
that's interesting. And you do see that a lot, even in, maybe the mid grades with a short I and short E, the I and the eh. So if they can look in the mirror and see, I can see how that makes a big difference. So you've noticed this make a change in their progression for
I've
you.
seen a great change. What is so fun for me is to have the first grade teachers now come back and say they are coming into first grade knowing this. And they can start first grade already blending words, writing 3 sound words, and they really can then start that curriculum. Like you were saying, we can add in blends, we can add 4 sounds, we can add in those. We talk about long vowels, we talk about the sounds of long vowels in kindergarten, but we don't talk about the spelling patterns of long vowels in kindergarten. So, but then they can apply those, like everything builds upon one another. And I think that's why I love the kindergarten curriculum, is because I get to see it go from, for some kids, from very little to understanding the alphabetic code.
And it is so fun to watch that process and to see in the short time I was there, your kids light up about it. That's really fun to see. They're doing it. Let's talk about socially. What are some things that they learn during the kindergarten year, and what can they bring to kindergarten already doing? So for families that maybe have a child in preschool, it might be nice for them to know, what should they really come to kindergarten already doing socially? I know that's a big question.
Yeah. I think that one thing, like the proximity, like, is your child able to be around other kids and sit and without having to get up and just do their own thing? Because that is I think that's the hardest part of those first few weeks of school, is most of these kids are conditioned to get what they want when they want it, because
that's the time we live in.
It's the time we live in, and they don't have to do the same thing as the person next to them, because they can just put in headphones, earbuds, and do something next. So I think in our own families, just being able to turn off some devices and having some talking time. I think the biggest thing is sometimes certain kids have never been told no. We live in a time where it's really easy to say, yeah, just go get on your device and do whatever you want. Or here, will you get this game? Yeah, let me get that for you. And this is very specific to maybe this area and the kids that I teach, because I know that not everybody has those resources, but I think being able to come and just do what everyone else is doing, being able to wait to answer something.
Wait time, definitely.
And I think that's okay for parents to say. If I'm on the phone, it's okay to say, I need you to wait till I'm done, and teach that skill. Even as adults, sometimes like we'll get a text message and I'm in the middle of talking to you and I look down at my phone. Well, in the past, we weren't interrupted that way. And so I think sometimes we're teaching kids that it's okay to interrupt because we are interrupting them all the time with
That's a
tuning
good point.
into our devices. So what message are we sending to them?
That's a really good point.
And trust me, this is like a total do as I say and not as I do, because I can preach, but like I suffer from the same problems that I talk about with my own children.
Same. Yeah, no, a couple of things I want to respond to, especially with interrupting. Yeah, that's a skill that I was thinking recently. Oh, I'm going to come back to that with my class because we are. And then I noticed it because it was on my radar. Like, I'm going to do a specific lesson on that. And then when I came home that weekend, I thought, oh my gosh, we do this as a family and we're talking over each other. What is happening? And so I know exactly what you mean. We get into some bad habits, but then in the classroom as a teacher, you notice it more because what if we have so many, 10 trying to interrupt or talk over each other at the same time? We just notice it more. The other thing is I read that book as well because you recommended it, and Kids These Days by Jodi Carrington. And I had never really explored that thought about proximity. And it's helped me in my teaching because just like you said, they do. Kids come home and they just maybe go to their rooms and have room time because they want to be in there and have a little break, but maybe watch their own show or be on their own device playing a game or whatever. There is a lot of that. And I'm not trying to say that everyone is doing devices, but that is one of the challenges of our time, that there are a lot of devices. And like you said, especially for the area we live in, most kids do have some kind of extra device at home that they
And
can.
it's not even the devices, it's just the homes we live in. Like I shared a room with my sister the majority of my life growing up.
Yes.
A lot of children that I teach have never had to share a room. And so the fact that they have to sit next to someone 18 inches apart on a rug,
They're in
and
their space. They feel like they're in their
they
space.
don't understand how to be in the same space at the same time. And
Is there a cap on how many students can be in a kindergarten class in Utah, at least, which is where we teach?
to be honest, I'm not aware of a certain amount. I know that like per school, there's a formula that of how many teachers per student ratio on
FTE,
whole,
yeah.
on whole a school can have. I've been really fortunate the 2 years I've been in kindergarten to be, I'm at 22 and 20 right now.
And you have an aide, because that happens at our
I
school.
have an aide, but the aide I have right now is part of COVID relief money. And so
Okay.
I've had aides, but I believe the funding goes away next year, which is really sad because it is so incredible to have this aide in my classroom. Because while I'm doing explicit teaching on how to write the letter N or how to write the letter A, I am showing and demonstrating up on a board, but I can't be in 20 places at the same time to make sure that each student's pencil's on the top line. And so she's able to walk around, she's checking. As soon as I kind of am done doing my sampling, I can walk around and check. But that's kind of the symphony of teaching, is trying to find the ebb and flow of how much walking around and correcting I can do to keep bad habits from being started, and then getting back and starting the next part of the lesson before my students that get it fast are tuned out, and my students that aren't getting it aren't completely frustrated. So that's just having a TA
It's a big deal.
Amazing. I can't imagine doing what I do and not having somebody here to help me.
We need the extra funding from here on out
Funding.
because I noticed while I was there, I kind of stuck with one table and she was at the other table, and we were walking around checking and correcting, and even how they're holding their pencil. And like you said, when you're demonstrating, you can't have eyes on everything. So that is a valuable piece. I didn't realize that's an extension of COVID money, but I'm glad that funding went to something really great.
It is incredible. Well, and the thing that's like when I'm demonstrating. So when I'm focusing on showing them how to do it, I also don't get to see who's already picked up their pencil and is trying to do it instead of watching.
Mhm.
So sometimes just that extra set of eyes that's making sure that everybody's eyes are on me when my eyes are down at the paper demonstrating is fantastic.
And so talk about parents, because they will be the ones, I know for us, they picked up the pieces of the extra help for what's kind of common in this area is power hour, where you will have a 1 hour rotation and 15 minutes in different stations where you're doing Haggerty, which is a phonics demonstration or activity together for a few minutes. And you might do a writing station. I don't know if kindergarten, I wasn't there for that piece because I had to leave early. And so how do you work that with parents, and how valuable is that?
I'm really fortunate to live in an area where there is an abundance of parents willing to help in the classroom. What I do in my classroom is I have like a literacy, we call them like literacy centers, and there's 4 rotations and they visit one of them each day of the week. So I have like a listening center where they get to just learn that like reading is for enjoyment. And sometimes they're going to enjoy a story and sometimes they're not. And they get to have an opinion on
Mhm.
a book. And so they have an opinion and they get to color a picture and they get to talk about those things. But the biggest thing that that listening center in kindergarten is teaching them is, first of all, just how to hold a book, how to turn a page, how to look at pictures, how to find who the author is, just understanding those basic print concepts that you hope a kid leaves kindergarten and knows where the front of the book is. Because I know when I was in first grade, sometimes it was hard to, can you turn to page 10? And then we have an ABC center where they're working on a letter book, and we just do 1 letter a week, and they get a real item that begins with that letter sound. They're going to practice correctly forming that letter and drawing pictures that start with that letter. Another rotation we have is we've been fortunate enough to have a really great adaptive software this year, and the kids get on there 1 time a week, and it pushes them ahead depending on how well they're doing, or if they're not doing well on a skill, it will go back and do a reteaching moment. And then we have a teacher table where I can do more specific interventions for each kid at different levels. And with that TA in my classroom, sometimes she'll run that teacher table and I'll be doing intervention with my level 2 students. And
Will you explain that so people know?
so an
And for us,
instruction is instruction for everybody, and everybody needs that instruction. Like if a student's not comprehending what we're teaching at a tier 1 level, then I'll need to go in, and we call it a tier 2 intervention time. So last week, if we taught the letters M, A, S, and T, and I know that there are tons of like those kids, there's a group of my kids that still don't know what those letters are. I'm going to pull those kids aside really quick and do a little intervention. I use Beverly Tyner. She's incredible. It's free if anybody needs a really good kindergarten intervention on letters, sounds, and phonemic awareness, phonics. It's a great one. So we'll pull them during that time, but my community volunteers come in during that time and do a program that we call skill sets. A great lady that used to teach at my school and also has grandkids in my class came up with this skill set book, and it's skills that every kindergarten student should master before going to first grade. And so these moms or dads come in, and some of them are grandmas. One of them is just my friend's mom comes in once a week, and my mom comes in once a week, and my mother-in-law comes in once a week. I recruit anyone and everyone that will come.
so great.
And they just work one-on-one with the student. They can practice these skills at home and come ready to pass it off. And if they don't come to school ready to pass a skill off, these people are still going to call them back to the table. They're going to work with them for 1 to 2 minutes and then send them back to their literacy rotation. That way we just know that every kid's getting a little bit of one-on-one mastering a skill that they need to know to be successful in first grade. This year, the thing I've loved is that I can really just read a book. We can talk about it. We can explore it. We can write about it and have a response to it. I feel like there's so much in the kindergarten curriculum that needs to be taught in the 3 hours they're here, that there's not a ton of room anymore for what you and I experienced in kindergarten. There's not a lot of free choice right now because there's so much curriculum to cover. For instance, 20 years ago when I was teaching first grade, full day first grade, is now what I teach in half a day of kindergarten, like almost the same curriculum. That's how much the curriculum's changed.
That's very telling.
And so there's not it's a very structured day, but I believe that it really sets them up for success. And if I didn't believe that what I'm doing in the classroom doesn't highly affect self-esteem later, I wouldn't keep doing what I'm doing. Because I know for a fact, like I was a struggling reader, I knew that it affected my confidence and my self-esteem, that if I can make sure that these kids have phonemic awareness and that they have letter recognition and that they can read at least words with 3 sounds going into first grade, I just know that it's going to be a boost in their confidence. And so that is like my number one goal, is to connect with them so that they trust me to help them learn to read. This is like one of my favorite quotes. It was from our letters training. And I think it is like fascinating because I truly love the beginning stages of reading, but it says, if a child memorizes 10 words, the child can read only 10 words. But if the child learns the sounds of 10 letters, the child will be able to read 350 3-sound words, 4,320 4-sound words, and this is crazy, 21,650 5-sound words. So
from 10 sounds.
From 10 sounds.
That's
And so if we can
incredible.
really like build that phonemic awareness, beginning phonics, letter recognition at a young age, we are setting them up to tackle really hard words in the future.
And there are little ways parents can do that at home. Like you can be in the car. Hey, what was the letter you did today? Oh, can we see anything in the car that starts with N? All those little things, they do matter.
That is what I've told at conferences. I told my parents, I said, hey, we just need to get in the habit of having stoplight games. And I said, let's have like, you're going to be at a stoplight. While you're at that stoplight, I want you to look around and whatever you see, say, what's the first sound in bank? What's the first sound in chapel? What sound in red? Just look around and start to like let them hear those beginning sounds. And then if your kid's awesome at beginning sounds, let's see if we can hear all the sounds in a word or the ending sound. And I think that is just getting, instead of tuning out proximity, you're in a car, you're close to each other, but are we together?
That is excellent advice. Will you say what is just so satisfying? You've said some of it, but why do you love kindergarten?
I love growth. Like I love, okay, first of all, like I know every teacher, like we don't love the sound of the word data or data, whichever way you pronounce it. I will say being able to look at data and see growth is so satisfying.
It is.
It's so great to see a kid coming in knowing 5 letter sounds and leave knowing 26. That to me is the best part of my job, is being able to see them move through the stages of writing and through the stages of literacy.
You know what? Kindergarten teachers, they're going to be first in the gates of heaven. It's true because the patience level and then the pausing and having those little teachable moments. I wish everyone could see it. I wish they could just, kind of like the windows of a department store where you could just peek in and see what's happening. It is so beautiful and so inspiring. And you are lighting up over what they're doing, and they're lighting up because they know that you love what you're teaching and that they know that you love them. And that really is what teaching is. And so I'm grateful that you let me come into your classroom and hang out with you. But I was thinking about that, kindergarten teachers going to heaven first. And I was thinking about the word consecrate. I've always just been a little bit intrigued about that word, that we consecrate. It means to set apart or dedicate something as sacred. And that is what I felt while I was in your classroom. But thank you so much.
You're the best.
Thanks for being part of today's class. To submit a question or topic for further episodes, please email elementary.schooled@outlook.com. School is out for today, but please remember, when we strengthen a child, we strengthen society.